all. This is Dr. Mobeen Sayed from drbeen.com. Welcome to one more show. So I have been away for about 10 days. So I thought let's catch up on the news that has happened. There is a lot of news. So let's start and review some interesting things that have happened. First thing, Dr. Bean, $67 is back for a few days. So here is a link in the description, just for a few days, because the reason was somebody reached out and said, I am not a medical person and I am hoping I can just get access to educate myself. And I'm not a professional, so I'm not going to use it professionally. So although I believe 97 is a price which is very reasonable, even lesser. But anyways, this 67 is here for a few days. I think what I'll do is I'll offer two categories. Healthcare professionals can buy with 97. If you are a healthcare professional and going to buy it, just click on the pricing and buy it for the $97. But if you're not a healthcare professional, maybe you want to try it for 67. Let's try for a few days. So this is this. Then this is the first update. US to end purchase of COVID-19 vaccines as industry pivots to commercial market. So US has said, we are not giving you any further taxpayer dollars to purchase these things. Now we have established you. Go ahead and start selling these products by yourself. So you would see that these vaccines were now, COVID vaccine we're talking about, these are going to start becoming the part of protocols in the hospitals. These will become part of the protocols for newborn babies and so on. That is the commercialization you would see. It was making me angry because they had written their plans for how they would create and maintain the market. However, why I brought this message up is that, think about it for a second, this also means the healthcare agencies, the CDCs, FDAs, are not really in need of furthering this agenda. They are not, I hope you understand, they are not working as feverishly for maybe Pfizer's and others to promote their agenda, because these companies are now asked to do this by themselves. So then what are the CDCs and FDAs are going to do? So I'm going to show you one more interesting thing. So this is Dr. Paul Marik this morning shared this news and said, so this is the Walensky citing botched pandemic response, calls for CDC reorganization. So Dr. Marik said, look, this is an astonishing admission, but there is no accountability. And if you actually look at this whole thing, as I read, there is actually no accountability. And I responded, and my response email, I think, is not even eligible to be read aloud here. The summary of that, after removing all the interesting words, is the following. This is a very common technique in the upper echelons of any organization, that after doing all the stupid and silly things, when the deed is done, then they need to mask it and cover it or stonewall and protect themselves. To do that, what they do is they create a layer of scapegoating. So they create a layer of scapegoats. So top executives then come in and they say, we think that there were mistakes that were made. And if you think about it for a second critically, you are finding out that mistakes were made after 2 years of people yelling and screaming, saying you guys are doing something incorrect. So they said 2 years were passed. Now you are saying that mistakes were made, but go back to this previous news. These companies actually do not need CDC and FDA to further their agenda anymore. So now FDA and CDC have to make sure that their house is clean and they do not become accountable as these companies go on their way and people look into what did CDC and FDA did or do. So the second layer will be a scapegoat layer will be identified. They would be told your function is not great, you didn't do a good job. They will be accused, they would be blamed. So all of those things that we would say to this organization will then be blamed to a smaller set of people. We will not even know who those people are. Just a set of roles will be blamed, and they will not be blamed that you caused people to die or you did. They would simply be you are incorrect or mismanaged or miscommunicated or mishandled. These were the kind of misdata that you would, or words that you would see. Then the result will be they'll say, we have done now some reorganization. We knew there were a problem. Now we need a little bit more money and we will be better prepared for the future. And I said to Dr. Paul Merrick, I said, I can guarantee you, if there is another pandemic today, after all the restructuring, reorging, everything, the same organization would behave the same exact way. This is just gaslighting. This also protects the top brass because now they are the ones who are taking care of the problem. They have identified the problem. So now they can talk to the ones above them. For example, she can go to the president and say, you know what, there were issues and we have found them and we are going to reorg them. So let's say if in the midterms there are messaging that, hey, you guys really did bad. Now she has a narrative. She's going to go back and say, yes, we know it. We have announced that we are making changes. We have taken the responsibility of it. And so that would become the prevalent narrative. This would also take away any criticism. So when we say that CDC is not doing well, now their answer is going to be, yes, we know we are not doing well or we didn't do well. Sorry about that. We are taking care of it. Will there ever be an accountability? Will she say that, you know what, we messed up. I was the leader. The buck stops with me. And I don't need the scapegoat. I am the one whose leadership under which this organization functioned such horribly, wrongly. I am resigning, or I am open for accountability. But of course, that's not, this kind of a behavior I've seen so many times in big organizations. So if you see here, you would see these statements in the future, coming future, and you would see some of those over here. So Dr. Walensky said, delivering a sweeping rebuke of her agency's handling of the coronavirus pandemic. After 2 years, a sweeping rebuke when the government has actually walked away from all of this. Why did they not have this rebuke a year ago? Because they were still going to do what they were doing, because they were still furthering that agenda for the companies. If they started doing a sweeping rebuke at that time, then how would they further that agenda? They'll have to get back from that. They would not even get back now from that, but they do not need to do it. So we would feel a temporary lull that these companies have stepped back. But this is really, their baby has grown. Now they can fly on their own. So then she says, leaders of the agency's COVID team rotated out after only a few months. So they had a team that would handle emergency situations, emergency health situations. The members in that team, because there is not always an emergency of a health emergency, members of the team will be assigned to that team. They would come in for a couple of months, work there or sit at a desk, and then rotate out. Now she has said that they would be there for 6 months. So what you would see is all of this is kind of more of a show than anything productive, performing. You would not see substance which you would put your finger on and say, man, this is awesome. This decision is great. So for example, here, people, instead of rotating out in 3 months, they will rotate out in 6 months. How great is that? After all of this thing that we mismanaged for 2 years, we would now rotate people in 6 months. Then they say, her plan, which also described in a video, to the agency more than 11,000 employees, agency of the more than 11,000 employees, was short on specifics. But there will never be specifics. And there are two answers to this, why there are no specifics. You would hear one answer, and that is they'll say, well, she's too high level. Her job is not to provide specifics. Her job is to provide guidance. And then the teams below her would create specific actions. I would say that if they're creating narrative for the, let's say, midterm, she could have asked her teams before these announcements to say, guys, go and find what changes would you do. And I'm going to now announce those changes as well. But this is just one more demonstration of how apathetic they are. That they're making the announcement because this is just for the sake of the announcement. They would put some pieces from here to here, some pieces there, some budget here, some budget there, and say, ta-da, all good. But it was welcomed by at least some of the agency's 24 senior staff members, as well as by outside public health specialists. Now, it will be interesting because these 24 staff members, some of them would also be moved around. So you would see what would be happening right now in there in terms of politics. The agency has been criticized for years as too insular and academic. And I laughed when I read academic. Did you have any feeling? Did this invoke any feeling in you the last 2 years of the CDC's or FDA's work that they look very academic, they look very educated, knowledgeable, data-oriented, looking at studies, looking at people's work, using that to make policies? Did you feel that even for a single second? So this actually, far from academic. The right words are going to be under the influence and so on. Just like there is driving under the influence, they're operating under the influence. In an interview on Monday, Dr. Walensky said she had repeatedly pushed staff members to turn around COVID-19 data as fast as possible. This, in my opinion, is another demonstration of her failure. If you have been repeatedly pushing them and not getting your work done, you are a failed leader. Some of the data are messy and some of data take time, she said. I've really tried hard to push data out when we had to. No, you actually, CDCs and FDAs were holding the data. Your own representatives said that we were holding the data so that people do not become vaccine hesitant and misinterpret the data. So there is no such thing as I pushed. Maybe she pushed, but I think as an organization, they know that they held the data. The changes Dr. Walensky described include the appointment of a former Obama administration health official. 2 scientific advice divisions will now report into Walensky. The agency is also altering its promotion system so that the rewards efforts that it excuse me, I'm still recovering from my COVID, that it rewards efforts to make an impact on public health and is less heavily based on the number of scientific papers published. What are they kidding us? The scientific paper published were also very selective and biased papers. And the decision making towards science was actually very, very heavily selective to the narrative they want and towards where the monies were. Anyways, these are, so keep thinking about it. That do you feel, how confident do you feel that these are the changes? At the end of the day, these are our agencies. We pay taxes to run these infrastructures. This is our country's infrastructure to run these platforms, these organizations, this machine that overall is part of the bigger machine, the USA. And here is what they're going to do to it. But keep in mind that with all of these kind of show changes, whenever somebody would say you did bad, they would say, yes, we know we did bad. That's why we made all these changes. And all of a sudden, there is a stone wall. You cannot go further. The briefing document said that Dr. Walensky wanted staff members to produce data for action as opposed to data for publication. Okay, so I would just leave it at that. Now, this is, to me, more of a protection play and or cover your behind play or creating a stone wall play. Eventually, this would just reduce their accountability and give them a narrative that, hey, we made mistakes. Or they would not even say we made mistakes. They'll say mistakes were made. And we've been working on it. Look what we did. So this is one. Then here, this was an NBC. And if you try to decipher my politics from all of this, I don't. So what I do is I Google or go in YouTube and search that CDC Reorg. And whatever videos come up, I select one video and just start watching. Here, this is a nice doctor here who is commenting about this and welcoming that great job, and he understands how difficult it is for communication. Because one of the things which I didn't see in this article, but apparently there is one of the message from Walensky was that, hey, it is very difficult to communicate scientific things. And so I am asking the agency to learn how to communicate scientifically. And they were discussing here that how difficult it was to convey scientific messages while the pandemic was raging and the data was evolving and the studies was coming in thick. And I was thinking, there was one guy sitting at his desk every day from 12 to 8 and was able to provide more knowledge and information and review of the studies than the whole CDC. And CDC is complaining that it was really fast. It just went so fast. We didn't have any chance of getting in front of it. So we didn't know how to articulate. We didn't know what to say and what to tell. It was just so scientific. And it was so difficult. Can you look at this? Issues at the speed that is so fast, that is faster than the Twitter sphere, for example. It is only difficult to communicate that quickly, but the margin for error is so small. If you make a mistake, it takes a very long time to regain public trust. So the thing is this, actually, many of us presenters, there are other presenters much better than me presenters, we have made mistakes and taken our videos down and removed parts of the videos or taken them down, redid them, because errors are human. I mean, look, I got COVID because I was traveling without prevention. So here I am, punished. But would I do that again? No, I have my povidone iodine over here and my vitamin Ds and everything. The point is, humans make mistakes. That is not a problem. Correcting them in time is important. And I don't think this is a demonstration of correction. This is a demonstration of burying and sweeping away the problems, horrible problems that were there, and now we cannot even talk about them. I'm sure that we will, but this is what their effort is going to be. This also is going to be used in, I believe, although this is a neutral organization, should be neutral, no Democrat or Republican type of organization, but still these narratives are going to be used for midterm as well to say, yes, because people are going to say, why did you guys do these mandates and this? And the answer is going to be used from this narrative. Okay, so then I have one more CDC thing, and then we continue for other news. This is someone sent it to me on Twitter. It made me laugh and cry at the same time. These things do that to me. So this is CDC, Understanding mRNA COVID-19 Vaccine. And if you see here, facts about mRNA COVID-19 vaccine. It says here, mRNA COVID-19 vaccine cannot give someone COVID-19 or other illnesses and blah, blah, blah. So here are some things, right? Then a few months ago, this is August, July, in July, this is July 22. This box had one more thing in it, which CDC just removed. So that person had said on Twitter that CDC has quietly removed some of the information. Look what they removed. The mRNA and the spike protein do not last long in the body. Our cells break down mRNA from these vaccines and get rid of it within a few days after vaccination. Scientists estimate that the spike protein, like other proteins our bodies create, may stay in the body up to a few weeks. This was there, July 2022. This is August, so last month. Today, it's not there. It's gone. It's gone. I wish if they had actually left it here and said uncertain, we are not sure. Or imagine if they saw some studies that said, well, the mRNA stays till 4 months in the lymph node. Or they saw that, for example, let's say the cells are not able to break them. I'm making this up. Cells are able to break mRNA. They could have said over here that the data about this is still being processed. We had said this before. Consider this to be not valid. We'll update it. Or somewhere else adding that, hey, we have a change here. So they have the last update on July 15, but that's about it. What is the update? Why is that update? So that's an interesting thing. So thank you, Twitter user, for sending it, Cool Bean. Now, the next one. Now get ready for a little more deep discussions. Some studies, I wanted to do these studies one day at a time, but that would have taken a lot of day for me to catch up to today. So I'm going to do some of these cluster discussions to have a bunch of studies taken care of together. Then we'll go back to our normal cadence. So this SARS-CoV-2 infection and persistence throughout the human body and brain. Research Square, this is a preprint. It has not been peer reviewed by a journal. And it was December 2021. December 2021. So pretty old. And it is here, Daniel Jetau, etc. What they're saying is, read this. Further, we detected SARS-CoV-2 RNA in multiple anatomic sites, including regions throughout the brain, for up to 230 days following symptom onset. Now we're not talking vaccines, we're talking SARS-CoV-2. But what is interesting in this study, so when I got this study, I became actually very interested in this one because my thought was maybe this would explain the long COVID. Because in the long COVID world, we have been talking about SARS-CoV-2 persisting or not persisting. We say from Dr. Bruce Patterson's work that S1 hangs out in monocytes for 15 months or more. But this has always been a discussion that does the whole virus itself, the SARS-CoV-2 itself, does that live on in the cells as well? And there was no study that proved or demonstrated evidence of it. Here is a study that says it. Look, once again, I'm going to read it. Further, we detected SARS-CoV-2 RNA in multiple anatomic sites, including regions throughout the brain, for up to 230 days following symptom onset. And somebody had commented that, well, it is RNA. No, actually, if up to 230 days RNA, they can only detect RNA. These are actually going to be the viruses. So I became curious and I was going to do a discussion, and I would still, but I want to show you something that I think you will pick up and say, oh, this may not be an entirely correct statement to write. This is why I'm so proud of the Cool Beans, that we have developed such a sharp eye because of studying this phenomena, this pandemic, for 2 years. So here, somewhere about 853, I believe. Here. Yeah. So this is the table. My apologies, it doesn't look very big, but uh, look at this. Patient ID in the first column. Second column is sex. Third column, age in years. Fourth column, duration of illness days, and then BMI. And they have said that duration of illness is something that is up to 230 days. They have found the virus persisting. And so if you see 25 days, 14 days, 14, 18, 42, 19, 7. And these are, I believe, autopsies. So these patients are also those who died eventually. They had the first symptom, they had the first SARS-CoV-2. Then after many days, they had another SARS-CoV-2 detection. So let's go to the 230 day. I cannot make this. I have to learn how to scroll this. Okay, so I cannot scroll it. The important thing was, just like over here, it says 49 and 12 days, and it says immunosuppression. The 230 days patients were actually immunosuppressed patients. And it said chronic, just like here it says chronic immunosuppression. It said chronic immunosuppression. So somebody who is in chronic immunosuppression, I had done a case study from South Africa about 8 months ago, where a patient with HIV had SARS-CoV-2 persisting in her for 200, I believe, 60 days or more. And it is possible for the virus to continue to stay and replicate in patients who are immunosuppressed for long times. So using that to say generally, further, we detected SARS-CoV-2 RNA in multiple anatomic sites, including regions throughout the brain, for up to 230 days following symptom onset. So these 230 days were two patients who were both chronically immunosuppressed. This is interesting in this study, that they found the SARS-CoV-2 in the brain of the dead people. And I did this discussion before as well, that there are two possibilities. One, when the virus has really caused so much of damage, then barriers are broken and it is everywhere. Second is that if virus has found a way to enter the brain, and brain was intact when it entered there, then there could be signs of the changes in the cell, that virus is trying to replicate there and the cells are trying to defend themselves. So there are markers and enzymes that are increased in the cell, which are an indicator that the patient was alive and fighting, but the virus was there. And I did that study as well a few months ago. So this is interesting. I'm going to go in detail. This is just to whet your appetite here. This is an interesting one for long COVID. Other than this one little piece that I don't agree with the authors, the rest is interesting. Okay, so next, I hope things are good and I hope my audio is working. It would be so much fun if I'm just talking with myself for 29 minutes. Okay, so let me see. Okay, excellent. I hope you can hear me. Continuing here. Next news, which I'm sure, again, you guys have all been up to the speed, and I am the one who is turning back and seeing these. British regulator first to okay Moderna's updated COVID booster. So Moderna has now the booster with Omicron, and they also have the original in it. And I remember when this discussion was happening, or let me first complete this news. So Britain has said that fine, we will have it. So they have now updated Omicron vaccine. Europe is saying that we're going to, within a couple of weeks, we would also, or a few days, weeks, they would also approve it or authorize it. US, I just saw They said, we will authorize that within next 3 weeks as well. I remember the discussion, the FDA briefing when this particular um, flavor was being discussed. It was Moderna, Pfizer, and Novavax, I believe. And some of us were listening to it together. Then I did a separate video about it as well. I also remember that they had asked this question, that should we keep the original ancestral protein in it in this vaccine plus the Omicron, or just have Omicron? And I remember somebody said, we have more familiarity and trust on the original one, so keep it. And I thought that was the stupidest comment I have ever heard from a medical professional. The science was totally lacking in it. And here is the lack of science. The spike protein that is now Omicron spike protein. So let's say this is Omicron spike protein. And this spike protein has some changes. And then this is, let's say, original spike protein. And that is different in some places. They're saying we want to keep this in there because we trust it. We have seen it working. If this is not going to work, then this is just useless. We already know that this does not work anymore, so that is also useless. So that means we now have two useless things with an adjuvant to cause reactions. If this would work, then you do not need this. We have even declared for those who are infected that even the previous original Wuhan infection time and this time are very different behaviors of the immune system. So it really bothers me to see that they have kept that vaccine protein in there as well. And the problem that can occur is that if our body preferentially started making antibodies on this side and less on this side, then we would end up with a less Omicron capable vaccine. So why not just leave it Omicron and then look for the further ones? So this just is not the best decision in my opinion, but they've made it. Then next news, which again, I'm sure you all are aware of. I think this is a welcome news. This is employees callously forced to choose between their conscience and their jobs, their jobs. So 10 million settlement. I was going to read jabs. A 10 million settlement has been announced by Liberty Counsel, which brought a lawsuit against North Shore University Health System on behalf of workers who were forced during the pandemic to take the experimental COVID-19 shots. So those who were fired, they got 20,000, 25,000. Those who stayed in the job but had to take the vaccine, they would be given 3,000 each. And those 13 people who started this lawsuit, they would get an additional 20,000. So I don't think that these monies really compensate for the loss of job or loss of career, derailment of career, or staying in the job, not wanting to have the vaccine and then having to have the vaccine. So I think that this would open the way for others as well. As part of the settlement agreement, North Shore will also change its unlawful no religious accommodations policy to make it consistent with the law and to provide religious accommodations in every position across its numerous facilities. Then this was also interesting. Liberty Counsel founder Matt Stavers noted this class-wide settlement providing compensation and the opportunity to return to work is the first of its kind. Although I still believe it's a welcome thing that this happened, My wish would have been that they take these individuals back in their positions. But we know that these positions are now either filled or eliminated, the money is saved, and so they can't go back. So, opportunity to return to work, what would happen? I hope they are able to get back in the same organization. But, anyways, so that's the news. Then I think we all saw this one as well. Pfizer's CEO Borla shows mild symptoms after testing positive for COVID, and so he had 4 shots, and now he is taking Paxlovid as well. I just want to not talk further about him. Then Omicron BA4 and BA5 can't be neutralized by the prior infections. This is also something that I'm going to do as a separate study, and this study is actually here. The study is here we isolated live BA4 and BA5 viruses and measured BA4-5 neutralization elicited by BA1 infection, which may have been the case with me, BA1, 2, and then BA4-5. But I think more importantly, I was talking with Dr. Keith Berkowitz, I was talking with Dr. Zaharakis, I was talking with Dr. Paul Merrick, and we in my culture, we have a saying that in your soul, you always know the truth. Or another flavor is that in your soul, the truth shines like a dawn of the sun. And so in my soul, I know that I was lax on vitamin D's and IV. Although in this travel, I was taking my IV. I was doing my prevention, but I was really lax on vitamin D. I was also lax on gargling. So my prevention was not as good as it should be and could have been easy. And secondly, when I was not using masks, these are important things, nasal sprays. So, for example, Dr. Zaharaki said to me today, he said, look, when I go to a dinner, over there, I cannot protect really myself. I'm sitting with everyone. We do not have masks and we're talking and eating. He said, I do this nasal spray before and then after. Dr. Keith suggested that to Dr. Paul Merrick. I called him to tell him what's going on. And he said, when I was traveling for Charleston, I had been taking my nasal sprays. So he said, every time I'll think I'm exposed, I'll just take my nasal spray. And he says it works wonders. And I would agree with that. So I have been talking about it. Remember, I talked about Sanotize as well. So here is a nasal spray that I would like to give some, I hope you can see it. Let me actually. So I have no commercial interest with them, but still they are an American company. I had received their letter as well, Dennis Kaiser. This company is Cofix RX. They actually wrote me a letter and sent these povidone iodine nasal sprays. I'm actually going to start using them. They sent me 3, and they said, hey, these are American made. These are povidone iodines. And they wrote, we have included some samples for you to check out. Just shake them well and use 1 spray up each nostril. If you could share and help spread the word with your audience, that would be wonderful for a small but growing company. We are grateful for any help. So once again, if you can use them, I have no financial interest. They have done something good. And so here they are. I'm going to use this. Adania says he's snorting it. I'm going to start snorting it. Chris Neal says Afrin is a key. So Afrin is good as well. Afrin is good as well. So whatever floats your boat. All right. So back here. You betcha says correct, not too much. As so after exposure, if you suspect you have an exposure, then use them. Dr. Zaharaki said he definitely uses it at least every evening. Okay, so this is another comment. So here they said that We isolated the BA4 and 5 viruses and measured BA4-5 neutralization elicited by BA1. And they said in BA1 infected unvaccinated individuals, neutralization relative to BA1 declined 7.6 folds for BA4 and 7.5 times for BA5. So if somebody who's not vaccinated got infected with BA1, then the capability to neutralize BA4 or 5 was 7 times less. If somebody was vaccinated and then they got the BA1, then according to the study, they say that BA4-5's reduction or of neutralization is 3 times or 2.6 times. So I would do this discussion a little more in at length, but I wanted to make sure that we are aware that these kind of studies are out there as well. And so that plays into reinfection. Then California officials warn of misleading COVID rapid tests. I think we had these tests. This time when we did the test, my son had the test at the hospital and my wife had the test. Me and my wife had it at home and we used this. They both came positive. Excuse me. So they are saying that if it is not positive, then 24, 48 hours later, do one more. To me, that seems a little absurd. 24, 48 hours later, patient is going to be in a serious situation on some patients. And so it could be 10, 12 hours later. I think they're saying the viral load increase a little more for these to become effective. I would think, and they may also be thinking about pricing and how many tests you may have. And so it is a sure shot that 24 to 48 hours later, if there is virus, that would have enough load. But if there can be more tests, then I would think every 12 hours. So this is another news that these tests they are turning in a lot of false negatives. When COVID-19 or flu viruses kill, they often have an accomplice, bacterial infection. Now, this is not a new thing for doctors, and that is that many times viral infections that debilitate a person's immune system, meaning these are aggressive infections like COVID is, these can result in secondary bacterial infections. Many times a sinusitis with high-grade fever after COVID, during COVID. I was talking with Dr. Tommy Zaharakis today, and he was saying that many of these are actually bacterial outcomes, the secondary outcomes with the choked and swollen nose. Secondary pneumonia can occur, secondary bronchitis can occur. And so having antibiotics is actually useful. I have seen many people mocking or making fun of doctors who start antibiotics right away as well. I have actually worked in chest medicine as well when I used to practice medicine in hospital. And we used to, if we would suspect that this is viral infection and the patient is probably going to end up becoming weak and the opportunistic infections would take hold and secondary infections would happen, we would start them with protection for the bacterial infection as well. Now, in case of Z-Pak, it is also anti-inflammatory, especially for the lung tissue as well. So it has a very specific role to give in case of COVID as well. And when the patient starts becoming serious, then of course it's not just the COVID, it is also the cytokine storm, and there are also bacterial infections. It's the sepsis which actually end up killing the patient, which includes bacterial infections too. Updated COVID boosters should be available in 3 weeks in the US. So that is the last part of this discussion. Rima is here after a long number of days. How are you doing, Rima? Okay, so this is what we have. I am still not fully up to speed. We still have a lot of news. Tomorrow we'll have Michelle. I hope you remember the talk. That was why was Michelle Zimmerman walking into the walls. So tomorrow she is going to be with us for an update. Then we'll continue back on Friday as well. So Andrea says, I received no treatment for my COVID, told to monitor the SpO2 and go home. So when my son went to the emergency room for spiking fever, he was actually given nothing. Even for the fever, he was just given an IV because he had not eaten and then asked to go home. He was given an antiemetic because he said I was nauseous and asked to go home. And finally, we were discussing just before we started this talk in the pre-show, a cool bean was saying that finally doctors have agreed that that my condition is POTS, postural orthostatic tachycardia, or postural syndrome, tachycardia syndrome, instead of anxiety. And this is, I want to comment on this one. This is a common problem in medical field, that if we do not know something, a patient is sitting in front of us, they're presenting some complaints and we don't understand it. The right thing, and many of us do that, and that is to say, okay, I'm going to figure it out. Many of us actually know it, whatever it is. But when we don't know it, and now I want to exclude myself from this because I don't do it, many of the doctors who don't know it, they actually have this thinking process that because they don't know the mechanism, they would say, this is not correct disease. I've never heard of this. I've never seen this symptom set. I've done all my labs, I've done all my tests, I've done all my physical examination. Whatever could cause it, that is in my head here. Whatever my knowledge for differential diagnosis of these symptoms, that is not fitting. That means this patient is psychologically upset or anxious or something. And many times, if they go and actually read, they would find the reason and they would not have to categorize a patient as a psychological case. It is interesting that last time when I talked about my palpitations and urinary frequency, there was a doctor who's, at least his name was a doctor, and he said, when a doctor sees a patient like you, they would immediately say you are psychologically upset. And I said, this is, even in the comments, people have, even if they're doctor or not, they have the same exact behavior. This is a damaging behavior. And it not only discourages the patient, it also takes away the opportunity from the doctor to actually manage the patient, find out something new, learn that as well for the future patients, and do something good for this patient. And the final thing is the patient is now stuck with the psychiatry or psychology, and they're taking medicines, and it's nothing bad going in the psychiatry or psychology, but going to psychiatry to take psychiatric help for a non-psychiatric or psychological reason is horrible. And so my request to all doctors, nurses, NPs, PAs, medical students, when you do not know something, admit you do not know it. My wife's doctor did something funny. She would sometimes, she was a young, new doctor. And once I went with my wife, because she heard that I'm Dr. Bean and she wanted to meet me as well. So my wife was going for an appointment and she said, all right, I'll bring him along. So I went there as well. And this doctor was so good. She was young, so she had no chip on her shoulder that I need to know everything. And my wife presented some complaints and she said, okay, let me Google that with you. And they Googled it and she said, all right, I know there are some differentials. I was missing this. And so I'll do my workups. And I felt more confident in her approach than if she would have said, you know what, I have, in my mind, there is no disease that fits this complete symptom set and general examination and the lab values. So this must be psychological. So that, I think, is a duty of the doctors to, before just, they can send them to psychology as well, or psych as well, and refer them and let the psych do the workup, but also do your own reading as well. And with the pandemic, this has actually increased, especially for long COVID and vaccine injury. So this is the discussion. Thank you very much, very much for sticking around for 50 minutes. I love you for this. And please like, subscribe, and share. There are links in the description. The 67 is back for a few days. If you're not a medical professional or student, then take advantage of that. This is honor system. You can actually, even if you're a medical student or professional, you can buy it at 67. But if you are medical professional, then my request is to go click on the pricing and buy the 97 one. And for the others, you can take advantage of 67. I would leave it up for a few more days, and then we would once again turn it off. The reason I turned it on is that so many folks reached out and said, we are really not going to practice medicine, but we would love to have access to this content. So with this, thank you very much. If you would like to support this work further, then there are links in the description. You can buy me a coffee, or you can use PayPal, or you can become part of Substack or Locals, or other such links are in there. Thank you very much, and I'll see you tomorrow.